I'm late to the party, but what's new? I am here to talk today about Alchemised. I am aware that most reviews that have been posted about Alchemised are kind of 2 to 4 weeks old now, but I've been thinking very much about the way that I want to talk about my experience with Alchemised, and so it's been percolating, it's been at the back of my brain. We've also had things like the Wuthering Heights trailer drop and things like that I've had to prioritise. So I'm a little behind everybody else, but I do feel like that I feel like we all have our own opinions, we all have our own thoughts, we all have our own interpretations of books. That's what makes books so beautiful, is that everybody reads it and everybody gets a unique experience from it. So I'm hoping that even though most of the content, most of the reviews have been done for Alchemised, mine still can add something. And if you're one of my subscribers, if you've been following along my book reading journey, you will know that I have been so excited for this. I've been so looking forward to Alchemised coming out, and so I have had a couple of questions saying, are you going to do an Alchemised review? When are you going to talk about Alchemised? Today, my friends, today we're going to do it. So I've got some notes, extensive notes, and I will be referring to these notes because I've made sure that I've thought about this in advance and I've kind of tried to structure as best as I can. Having said that, I'm not a perfect person, my thoughts do wander and I do have a tendency to overspeak. So if that's not your kind of vibe, if you're wanting something that is very well structured, very intelligent, very academically inclined, then feel free to go and Google another reviewer. This is going to be purely vibes at this stage. Maybe not purely vibes, but it's very me. It's going to be a very me review. So the first thing to say is that there are going to be spoilers in this video. I'm going to be talking about the whole book. I'm not going to be going deep into the plot or the storyline of it, more kind of overarching kind of themes and thoughts that I've got, but there may be the odd spoiler that falls in there. So if this is something, if you've not read Alchemised yet and you are worried about spoilers, then maybe don't watch this video just yet. Go and read the book and then come back to it. The second thing to say is that I may have differing opinions to everybody who watches this video, and that is fine. I think we all should be allowed to have very different opinions and we all should respect each other's opinions. So please respect them. Anybody who is out and out rude or horrible will not be allowed in my space. I will get rid of your comments because there is a way for us all to have differing opinions and be respectful of each other, but when it leans into the realms of insult or just plain rude, I'm not about that. I'm not about that. I'm about respect. So yeah, you may have absolutely loved Alchemised and therefore you're not going to be very happy with some of the less great things that I've got to say about it. You may also have absolutely hated Alchemised and you might be really offended that I found things in the book that I absolutely loved. Let's just hold space for everybody to have different opinions, okay? Thirdly, I feel like it's really important to say this at the beginning of the video because not everybody watches the entire video. I am here to say and hold my hand up right now to say I really liked Alchemised. I genuinely did like it. This is not going to be a bashing video where we bash on Senlin Yu or bash on Alchemised. I'm going to be talking about the things that I really liked and some of the things I didn't like quite so much. I would say that if you absolutely pressed me, I would say that 80% of it I kind of liked. I thought it was really good, but there was 20% of it that I just was a little bit disappointed with. So we are going to talk about both sides of it, but that's kind of just put it out there at the beginning. I am not in this video to bash either Senlin Yu or Alchemised. So for a couple of minutes in and you might be like, I don't even know what Alchemised is. Fair enough. Fair enough. It is a book which was published in September of this year by an author called Senlin Yu. Now, Senlin Yu uses they and she pronouns, so I will be using predominantly they, but I may alternate between they and she throughout the video. And they were primarily a fan fiction writer, and I actually took some information from their website that I want to read out for you because it tells you a little bit more about kind of their background. So it says that Senlin Yu is described as growing up in the Pacific Northwest where they studied classical liberal arts and culture. They started writing in the Notes app of their phone during their baby's nap time. Adorable. Their collected online works have garnered over 20 million individual downloads and have been translated into 23 languages. They live in Portland with their family and Alchemised is their first novel. So you get a bit of a sense of them as a writer. So the collected works that they're talking about in that bio are basically fan fictions that Senlin Yu wrote on a platform called AO3. Don't know what it stands for. I don't really know a lot about fan fiction, so if you're wanting to kind of like know more about fan fiction especially, I would recommend looking for a video that talks all about that. But basically, Senlin Yu has written different fan fictions on the platform AO3. And fan fiction basically is a writer who takes an existing novel, an existing world, an existing character, and basically writes a story, an original story, but based on that character or based on that world. So for Senlin Yu especially, she wrote a book called Manacled, and Manacled is a fan fiction Harry Potter. It has two main characters, Draco and Hermione, and it's their story primarily, but it's set within the world of Harry Potter. There is also some elements from The Handmaid's Tale that has been brought into that as well, although it's very, very little Handmaid's Tale in my opinion. It's mostly Harry Potter fanfic. So that's what Manacled was, and it did the rounds on TikTok. Everybody was reading it, and then uploading their me before Manacled, me after Manacled experiences. And so me being nosy, I wanted to know what the hype was all about. So I downloaded it I didn't download it, I read it on AO3 on the website, and I was absolutely hooked. Now, Senlin Yu has asked people not to talk much about Manacled, to kind of try and separate out Alchemised from Manacled. But that's really, really hard. I'm going to go on to talk about why in a minute. But the story was that Manacled came out, Senlin Yu wrote it, everybody loved it, it was blowing up on social media, and then a publisher took on Senlin Yu as a writer, and what they've done is they've adapted Manacled into an original book called Alchemised. This one right here. And so it stands alone. Legally, it has absolutely no correlation to the world of Harry Potter. There's nothing about it. And that's why I think Senlin Yu and the publishers have been very keen to say, please separate it from Manacled. Probably for legal reasons, but also because it is a standalone novel. It doesn't have to be read with Manacled. I think the slight issue comes when people have read Manacled and then go on to read Alchemised. And again, I'm going to come on to talk about that in a minute. But that's kind of the evolution of this book. That's where this book came from. So it was published in September, but it's had this whole backstory of being a fan fiction first and then being changed into an original work of fiction by Senlin Yu. So I'm going to, throughout this video, talk about Manacled in a comparison way. Not heavily, don't worry, I'm not going to go heavy on the comparisons, but there will be discussion of how things have changed. But what I really don't want to do is give J.K. Rowling any more of my time than she deserves, which is none. So I will be referring maybe to characters, but if I say the equivalent character, those of you who have read Manacled are going to understand it. And quite frankly, if you've not read Manacled, you don't need to. You really don't need to, and don't go looking for it. It's not available on the internet anymore. You can't find it. They've removed it. You don't need it. So when I say the equivalent character, you don't need to know who that equivalent character is if you've not read Manacled. And if you have read Manacled, you'll know the equivalent character that I'm talking about. But in the effort of trying to reduce the amount of HP references in this video, I'm not necessarily going to be naming all of the characters. So I hope that's okay. So the reason why I am going to bring Manacled into this, and the reason why I am going to talk about it, is because, quite frankly, it influenced so much of my reading of Alchemised, and I didn't necessarily want it to. To be honest, I went into Alchemised with absolutely, I won't say I went into it with zero expectations, because having read Manacled, I knew the calibre of writing that Senlin Yu could do, and I've said this in previous videos that I was so excited to read their work and to read what they did next. I would say I'm even more excited now to read more of Senlin Yu's work, because actually I think the more that Senlin Yu steps away from Alchemised, away from Manacled, the better a writer I think they will become, and the stronger they'll step into their own self as a writer. But we have to talk about the two together, Manacled and Alchemised, because it didn't change enough in the storyline, in my opinion, to be able to completely separate and step away, to the point that the overall storyline is Helena is a healer in a magical world, and there is a war going on, and basically the allies, I will call them, the good side, they lose the war. And so at the end, it's a bit of a time twisting one. So it starts at the end, basically, of the war, where the war has been lost. She's in captivity, she's lost all her memories, and she is given to a man called Cain, who his equivalent is Draco. in, and Helena is Hermione. I'm going to say that once. Draco is Ferren, Helena is Hermione. And she's given to Ferren, and they have to do this repopulation effort. Bit strange, I'm going to talk about that more in a minute as well. And then it's about him trying to find her memories. They believe that she's got some kind of knowledge in her mind that is locked away and he has to access it. And so that's the story really. And throughout him trying to access those memories, she unlocks those memories. And so we go back in time then to the past when the war is raging and in full swing, and we find the lead up to the end of the war. Then it goes back to the present time when she's back in captivity again, and it kind of solves that situation. That's the kind of flow of it. And that is Manacled. That is absolutely, it's exactly the same as Manacled. We start with the kind of present, we go back into the past, we come back to the present again. And so when it started, I opened the book, I wasn't sure what we were going to get. And when it started, exactly, almost word for word as Manacled did, but with some of the obvious changes made, I was like, oh, okay. It really is still like Manacled, because there'd been very little said about what we should expect from Alchemised in terms of the comparison. There was very little said about it, and so I didn't know what to expect. And I was like, oh, it is very similar, like almost exactly the same plot, but a lot of obviously the world has changed, the magic system's changed, that and the other. So we have to compare the two. So I think the biggest thing for me about the storyline was the fact that it had the same pacing as Manacled. And to be honest, I feel like we needed a bit more time spent in the present and the past. I feel like we just needed more. It needed more space to breathe as a world, as a storyline. The problem with Manacled is that you're coming into it with a pre-existing knowledge. There's 8 books that have been published previous. You know the world, you know the characters, you know the war, you're invested, you know why the baddie is the baddie and the good people are the good people, and you are ready for that next level of the fan fiction because you've already got all of that backstory. We don't have that with Alchemised. You are being dropped in at a point in this world and in this story. And so I did feel like it needed a bit more in terms of the pace. Some people have said that parts of it are really slow paced and then other parts of it are too fast paced. I don't think I picked up on the pacing that much in this, but all I can say is that I wanted more. I find very, very fast paced books sometimes a little bit difficult for me to get into because I like description, I like place setting, I like world building. The only place I think it does really work is in crime novels, because in crime novels you are literally focused on the story. You don't really care about the world too much. But in fantasy, I want to feel like I'm falling into that world, like all I want to do is escape to this world. And I didn't get that with Alchemised. I didn't really even understand how the world worked in some ways. I mean, there was the main city, and then there were these other states, these other countries that kind of got involved in the war, but kind of didn't either. And I didn't really understand why they did or didn't get involved. I don't think that was really, there wasn't enough space to really explain that enough for me. The world and the storyline, it, like I say, needed that space, and I think almost the publishers would have been better to cut this down into multiple books. It would have made it more commercial sense for the publishers because they could have made more money selling more books. But the thing is, this is a big book to start with. If I turn it round, you can see it is enormous. It's 1,000 pages long. And so there isn't any space in the physical book for it to be any bigger, really. I mean, you do have, I'm looking up at my bookcase up here and I've got 2 enormous books that are on a par with this. One is Tombland by C.J. Sansom and the other is Ken Follett's Winter of the World. Those are both really big books, but from what I understand, both of those are, well, neither of them are debuts. In fact, I say from what I understand, I know neither of those books are debuts from that author. So to have a debut that is 1,000 pages or more longer would have been really, really difficult because you're trying to get people who don't know anything about that author, that world, that character. You're trying to get them to invest in a really long book. And so it very rarely works. There are some obvious kind of standouts, I'm thinking of, is it Doctor Strange and Mr. Norrell, that is like massive, and it's a first book, or it's a standalone book, or it's the first book in a series. But overall, I think publishers are very reluctant to do that as a first book. So I can understand if Senlin Yu had said, we need to broaden it, we need to do more of this, that and the other, they might have been like, can we not? Because it makes it a really big book. I don't understand, obviously. I was not involved in any of the book development conversations. Shocking that, isn't it? You obviously, none of us know what was talked about in those meetings, what the development conversations were around how to transition Manacled into Alchemised. But I feel like the storyline felt quite thin, and the world, I didn't understand it enough. And so I didn't really feel like I invested enough. I didn't feel invested enough in the characters. So, for example, the magic world. I really loved the magic world. I loved the concept of having necromancy and vivimancy as a negative and a positive kind of force working together. I don't know why they didn't just use the word magic, because it was all about resonance. And I like resonance as well. I like the it's one of those words that makes you feel something as well as reading it. And so I do like resonance. I just feel like there was this almost fear to use the word, can't use the word magic, because that writer, the 8 novel writer that we shall not name, that writer uses the word magic. But that writer didn't coin the word magic. The word magic is a word, and they could have used it. I don't know if there's maybe there was some kind of legal issue that meant that they absolutely couldn't use the word magic, but it just meant that it kind of broke the wall for me when I was reading it, broke the immersion, because I was like, just use the word magic, it's fine. Like, use various different words, it's fine. It felt too intentional in terms of trying to separate itself really strictly. And again, that's not a Senlin Yu problem. I'm going to actually say that now. None of this really is a Senlin Yu issue. I feel like it's more of the editors, it's more of the publishers. They know the industry. They obviously know the legalities, because they will have been in discussions around how legally this book could be adapted. But it feels a little bit like the legal side of it became a little bit of the albatross around the neck of the book, and it kind of weighed it down a little bit. Whereas I feel like if they'd have split it into 3 books and really allowed Senlin Yu to play with the narrative and say, right, let's say we take the present bit up to the point that Helena's memories come back, and we make that book 1. Build the world, build the characters, let us know people, find out who Luke is. Because I have to say, I'm calling him Luke. I don't know if it's Lush or Lush. I don't really know. I called him Luke in my head because I'm Yorkshire. So, let us find out about Luke. I was not invested in Luke's character at all. Didn't really like him, to be honest, if I'm quite honest. And I know that his equivalent character, the one with glasses in the other book, is I won't say he's a problematic character. He's in some ways a well-written character. Hate that I have to admit that, because he has flaws. And in this, I feel like there were maybe more flaws to Luke's character than there were redeeming factors. I didn't know Luke enough to feel invested in why Helena really would put her life on the line to save his, or would allow herself to be treated really poorly in order to save the world that they were living in. I can't even remember the name of the world, so that tells you everything you know about the impact that the world building had on me, really. I know that we do get a little bit of Helena's backstory in that we hear about her father and the kind of this almost zombifying of people. Can't remember the name of what they become, the people, when they're dead and then they come back to life again. The zombies, I'm going to call them. Don't kill me in the comments. Her father, thinks she's a zombie, and so he's trying to kill her and this, that and the other. And I get that, but I wanted more. I wanted more of a lead up. And it doesn't have to be boring. I think people see world building and characterisation sometimes as, oh God, it's really boring. And that's individual readers' styles. I've heard some people will skip any text that is not dialogue, and they will only read the dialogue in a book. Absolutely mind blown. I could not do that. I love description. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't like the Victorian style of description where you go into a scene and then spend 3 days describing what a room looks like. I'm not talking about that level of description. I'm talking about Helena as a character interacting with this world and us learning more about the world and about the characters as she is exploring the world. And I think the slight issue with this is because Helena is imprisoned at the beginning, she's got no freedom, and so we have very little ability for her to interact with that world. The only way we can do it is through memory and through the kind of the going into the past and this, that and the other. But I do think that we could, however, I mean, I'm not here to tell Senlin Yu how they should have done that. I just wanted more of it. I just would have been quite happy having one smaller book with more of the world developed in that one. And then at the end of that one is the point when Helena gets her memories back and it's like, oh, okay, she's actually in love with Ferren. And then that's kind of the, whoa, what's going on next? And then that could have been book 2. Could have been a 2-book thing, actually, not even 3. I mean, I like 3 because 3 is a nice round number, isn't it? But it could have been a 2-book series. I just felt like that would have given us a bit more in terms of the world and the characters. Another thing that I did want to address is the sexual assault element of the book. That's how I'm going to refer to it. Because of things like your video being taken down if you use the word sex or rape. So I'm going to use SA or sexual assault as the terms, but please know that I am not purposefully avoiding talking about it as a topic or avoiding saying it. It is simply because that's the way that content creation apparently works in 2025. So there is a scene, this is where the Handmaid's Tale part of the fanfiction kind of comes into it. It's in the world, Helena is given to Cain, and they are part of a repopulation effort where many of the people in the world have died, and so they need to repopulate. I found the repopulation part of it to be my least favourite part of Manacled, not only because it is very harrowing, it's very distressing to read. It does come with a content warning, or did come with a content warning, did Manacled, so you knew what you were coming into. But it's not only because it's harrowing, but I just didn't really see the point. And it was at that point that I was like, oh, this is a fan fiction. I can tell this is fan fiction because it's taken from The Handmaid's Tale. But having said that, I think there was more of a reason to have a repopulation effort in Manacled than there was in Alchemised. Because in Manacled, we know that the baddie, you know, old Snake Eyes, he valued pure blooded magicians, magic people. He valued that. And so in the 8-book series, there is a discussion over the fact that, you know, the loss of magical blood is a tragedy and this, that and the other. And so you can understand why then, after the war, and he's won in Manacled, after the war he would be like, we need to repopulate. But the problem with that is that he valued pure blood so much that I can't see why they would have put Helena's equivalent character with Cain's equivalent character, because he is so pure blood and so valued. She's Muggle born, so she's at the very bottom of that magical hierarchy. And so that didn't really make sense to me anyway in Manacled, but I got why the repopulation effort as a whole was being put into that book, because it kind of fit with the main bad guy's character. In Alchemised, it just, because I didn't know the world and I didn't really understand the world that much or the magic system, I didn't understand why they needed a repopulation effort. Like, I didn't get that so much of the population had been decimated anyway. Like, it didn't make sense. And so for me, it felt like that whole sexual assault side story and the repopulation effort, for me personally, could have been taken out. And I'm not saying that we should have taken it out because we shouldn't be talking about that kind of thing. Absolutely not the case at all. There are so many books out there that do deal with those really, really difficult subjects and do it in a really sensitive way. And I think if you're going to put something like that in, you need to make sure it's not romanticised, and you need to make sure that there is space to discuss it. I don't feel like the repopulation effort and the sexual assault needed to be in Alchemised in order for the storyline to stay where it is. I agree that Helena needed to get pregnant. Absolutely, I get that. For me, it would have been almost better to have Helena slowly realising, or even having this burst of moment where she realises that she is in love with Kane, or was in love with Kane during the war, and then they have to keep it secret, and they rekindle their love, and it's like this explosion of their sexual relationship, and you have that, and then she gets pregnant. But that could have been all in secret, and I would have loved to see their kind of wrestling, because in Alchemised they very much wrestle with the fact that they've conceived this child through sexual assault, and it's really harrowing, whereas it would have been interesting to see them having conceived a child in a war zone, and knowing that maybe with the repopulation effort, or with like kind of, because we find out later that Murrow wanted this specific child for a reason, knowing that they are feeding into Murrow's plan for a child, even though they can't help but make a child because they love each other, and you know that's what's become its product of their love together. That would have been more interesting for me than kind of half delving into a sexual assault story, because I do feel like when Helena does get her memories back, for me, I don't understand how somebody who has been in love with someone then is assaulted by them, somebody who they love and who they trusted, how can then they can go back to loving them. And it's not a hard and fast rule, it's not black and white, I absolutely agree with that, you know, and I very thankfully in my own life don't have lived experience of that type of relationship, so I can only talk from my perspective. I can imagine that it would be incredibly difficult for virtually impossible for somebody to be able to go back to somebody after that kind of level of trust has been broken. Even though we know that Kane doesn't want to assault her, he doesn't want to be involved in the repopulation effort. Oh, my window cleaners are here. Because of the window cleaners coming, that's kind of broken my train of thought. But I think, like I say, I find it really hard to understand how someone could go back, unless it's people do go back to their abusers. I get that. That's not what I'm saying. What I mean is people go back to their abusers, but it's very entangled. And this is what I mean about, if you're going to put something like that into a book, it has to really be discussed, and it has to really be explored, and it has to be given space to do respect for people who are victims of that in the real world. And so for me, like I say, it didn't feel necessary, and I kind of wish it had been taken out a little bit. So yeah, those are my thoughts around that. It's a very tricky situation. I don't really think it was 100% necessary, and I wanted to make sure that I talked about it because it is such a big part of what people are discussing when they do discuss this book. So I think the other thing I really wanted to discuss as well was their relationship, Kane and Helena's relationship together. There were times when I really liked it. I liked their kind of tussle. I liked that he was, what is it they call it, a grumpy sunshine book or something like that. It's not quite that much with Alchemised because Helena has her own demons. She's not necessarily a bright, bubbly character, and he's like this awful grumpy person. It's not that black and white. It is a lot more subtle, which does speak to Senlin Yu's beautiful writing style. But he was like this kind of dark, really kind of deep character. I felt like actually his characterization was probably the best out of all of them. And he was, he was very he was nice to her one minute and not nice to her the other. And it was very much like that. But then she had this kind of softening effect on him. She softened him and she broke through those kind of defenses that he had. And I can't help it. I'm a little bit of a sucker for that kind of storyline. I love it. From all the way from being like 15 and reading Pride and Prejudice for the first time, I was hooked. But I do like it to be a little bit more subtle, and I did think that there was a little bit more subtlety in the past section. So I'm talking about the middle section of the book, when we've gone back to the past, which is about their kind of falling in love, their story throughout the war, how they come together. We do get that story and them kind of coming together and then falling in love. I liked that. There were a couple of things where I thought they didn't necessarily 100% makes sense, in terms of like they were meeting every week or whatever in this like factory, and it was supposed to be abandoned, but then there were people who'd lived there and made it their home. And I was like, if there are people living there, then how come they're not being spotted together? There was just a few little inconsistencies like that, whereas in the original, in Manacled, they are in a hut in the middle of nowhere, and it's very rural, and it's like a cabin. That made more sense to me. So that would have been, I think that would have probably been a little bit better in Alchemised if they'd made it a bit more of a rural setting, but that's like a tiny little kind of note on that. The big thing that I was reading and I was really struggling with was the lovemaking scenes, let's call it, between Cain and Helena in the past. I'm not talking about sexual assault scenes now that are in the present. I'm talking about in the past when they first come together and they first sleep together, and by sleep together, I'm assuming everybody knows what I'm talking about, but in the UK, we tend to say two people sleep together as like a polite way of saying that they've had sex. Okay? So that's what I'm talking about. But in the book, in Alchemised, it was almost so watered down that at one point I was like, have they? Have they slept together? Have they not? Are they just cuddling? Are they just laying in bed together? Like, it was so watered down. And to be honest, I haven't had time to go back and look through Manacled to see what those scenes are like in the original Manacled version. Personally, I do have a personal copy of Manacled that is mine. I got it off somebody. I didn't buy it. You are not allowed to buy copies of Manacles, whether they are printed and bound or whether they are digital. Please do not buy a copy of Manacled. It is not good. There are people that are going to try and sell you them. Please don't. But I have a copy that is for my own personal use. And I was going to go back and have a look at those scenes in Manacled to compare. Haven't had time. But what I do remember is my reaction to those scenes. Because I think the thing is, when two characters mate... No, I can't say mate. That's way too clinical. When they sleep together, when two characters sleep together, or when two humans sleep together, there's an exchange of chemicals that happens in the brain that attaches you to that person. And so I believe that when we read about two characters sleeping together, there's almost a little bit of that chemical kind of change that happens in our brains as well. We feel like, in a very kind of tiny way, we've gone through that experience as well, and so we become more attached to the characters, become more attached to their love story and them being together as people. When you don't have that, when it is watered down, when it is almost not, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Censorship is the word I was thinking about. I don't know why that would not come into my mind. It felt almost like the sleeping together scenes had almost been censored. And it's strange because you've got those sexual assault scenes at the beginning. They don't describe them, and they're not gratuitous. They're not graphic in many ways, aren't those sexual assault scenes? But I think where people enjoy romantasy books, there has to be an element of raunchy content. And it was so watered down that I was like, it almost felt like the books had been censored at that point. Like, maybe because they are primarily being published in America, maybe because they assumed that most readers would be American. I'm making huge leaps and huge assumptions here. That they were like, oh, we can't put too much gratuitous, smutty content in there because people won't like it, people won't read it. But that's why people liked Manacled. That was part of it, the romantasy of it, the kind of dark romance. And so it was really strange at times, those scenes where that kind of sexual tension was building and this, that and the other. There were just times when that it would build a little bit, but then it'd almost fizzle out, and I'd be like, right, okay, I really don't know. I don't even know what's happening. I can't even visualise what is happening in this scene at this point. So I thought that was really interesting. I'd be interested to know if anybody else has picked up on that, because I haven't really heard anybody talk about that in any other reviews, and I've not watched many because I obviously wanted to present my own specific views on the book. But I'd be interested to know if anybody else had picked up on that, because for me, that's where the characters, it's where I lost something in being invested in those two particular characters. So yeah, let me know what you thought of that. So I have talked a lot. I am going to have to leave this here, but I love talking about this book. I love the book. like I say, it's not necessarily, when the book was being published, I was so excited. I was like, I cannot wait to rip open this book. And I read it really quickly. I think I read it over about a 1.5 to 2 week period. That's not quick for some people. It's very quick for others. It's quick for me, is reading that, especially given that it is 1,000 pages. I was so excited to read it, and so it didn't quite live up to the expectations, but that's not to say that I didn't really like it. I would say, like I say, there was just this tiny little bit that I thought, it hasn't quite reached where I hoped it would, but all of the 80% of it that I really, really liked is down to Senlin Yu as a writer. They are very, very good at writing, phenomenal at writing, I will say. And I am so excited to see, I feel like I'm using the word excited too much. I am intrigued, excited, looking forward, have a lot of anticipation for Senlin Yu's career. What a way to launch yourself as a writer. I am so impressed with Senlin Yu. I follow them on social media. I was supposed to go and see them in Nottingham in November, and I didn't make it in the end, and I'm absolutely gutted. Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of Senlin Yu as it stands today. I am a very big fan of them. I am really looking forward to seeing what they write next. I think it's going to be really good to close the door on this chapter of Alchemised and Manacled now and do something new. I still want Senlin Yu to write fantasy. I wouldn't even mind if they stay within the world of Alchemised, but maybe a completely different book, a completely different story, different narrative, and maybe those characters are like way back in the periphery. Maybe it's talking about the establishment of the world and how that came to be. But personally, I would like Senlin Yu to try something completely new, as in a new fantasy, new world, new characters, because I think that's where they're really going to shine in terms of their creative style. The way that they took the world of Harry Potter and created Manacled, which just deepened everything to do with that world, was beautiful. And that's what I'm waiting for, that absolute beauty of the book, and that's what I'm waiting to see. And maybe it's because there was already an existing world. I personally do believe that Senlin Yu can create that again in their own 100% own work. So that's what I'm excited to see next. What do we think? I know that's been a lot. I know that's been a long video, and thank you so much if you've got to here, if you've got to the end of this video. Leave me a magic wand in the comments if you have got this far, and then I'll know that you've watched it to the end. But yeah, thank you so much for coming along with this. The Alchemised, I'll make a little playlist of all of my books to do with Alchemised and Manacled so that you can go back and see other things if you've not seen any other video of mine. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it for now. We will come back to Senlin Yu at some point in the future when they release a new book. If there is any more appetite to discuss Alchemised, I'm not going to say I'll never come back to it and make another video, but for now I feel like I've contributed some of my thoughts. And I need to do a number rating, don't I? I'm trying to do out of 10 now instead of 5 because 5 is just too small a number. I think I would give Alchemised 7 out of 10. I think that feels like a really nice kind of in between, which means it was a good book, it just didn't necessarily blow me away. But yeah, 7, 7.5, something like that. No, I'm not going to use halves. The whole point of doing 10 was that I wasn't going to use halves and quarters and this, that and the other. So 7. I'm going to stand by my original number, 7 out of 10. And yeah, thank you very much for watching this far. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please feel free to subscribe if you want to. And if not, just go and browse some of my content. I've got quite a lot of videos on my channel. They're books, writing, period dramas, a bit of lifestyle, the occasional chaotic craft thrown in there. I am a massive book nerd. I'm a word nerd. I'm writing my first novel at the moment, and I'm currently working on my 3rd non-fiction book. I do have 2 non-fiction books that are published. They are about women's history. You can find out more about them in the description box of this video. And yeah, thank you very much for joining me as I discuss this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.